Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Well, so I feel like we should talk a little bit about what's going on in the market today.
Sure.
And why don't we just go ahead and talk about condos right now, because we do a fair amount of business in the condo realm, a lot of condo listings.
Right. Well, the condo market has definitely had a drastic shift in the past few years. I mean, we had the tragic collapse down in Sunrise, Florida, a few years back with the Surfside condos. And as a result of that, post-tragedy, they found that there was a lot of deferred maintenance, a lot of things that were neglected with the maintenance of that particular building. And the Florida legislature took an in-depth look at condo buildings throughout the state, and they put some different legislation into effect. It was a comprehensive bill, SB 4D.
Senate Bill 4D.
Senate Bill 4D. And it basically looked at, it had an initial rollout, but then its final version, or the version that's in play at this point in time, calls for any condo that's 30 years or older, 3 stories or higher, has to have a milestone inspection done, and then a structural integrity reserve study done by its 30th anniversary. And then there's
so let's talk about that.
A lot of requirements.
The milestone inspection. And that has to be done by like a structural engineer
or an architect.
An architect. Yep. It's like a major,
comprehensive look at the building structure and all the main components of the building, looking at the balconies, the landing areas, the fire suppression system, the roof, the foundation. It really dives in and looks at everything.
And it's sad that a tragedy like down there at Surfside, that it took something like that for this to be actually put into place, because there's a lot of condos, not just in Brevard County, but like all over, that are, 70s, built in the 70s, 60s, that really, they've been fine, status quo, and they just kind of kicked that maintenance down the road, and they just haven't really stayed up on things.
Well, they didn't know what they didn't know.
They didn't know what they didn't know.
Is part of it. And prior to the collapse and the legislation, pretty much any condo that set aside 10% of their HOA fees in a reserve account, and it could be a pooled reserve account that didn't really take into account remaining useful life of the different assets, and it basically just kind of all went into a pool. And as long as you had 10% or more, then that condo is considered warrantable, and you could typically get conventional financing on those properties.
So warrantable, that means you can get financing. It doesn't have to be cash. And so to what you just said, all the different categories, now that enters the SIRS, right? The Structural Integrity Report. What's that? What's the last S? I forget.
Reserve study. Structural Integrity Reserve study. It's a forensic analysis of the budgeting.
Right. And that is like 10 different accounts.
I think there's like 8 actually, but
I was thinking there was 10, but maybe there is. But like for the AC, for the roof, for the different components, and now the condo associate, they have to have a amount of reserves for each one of those things, earmarked for each one of those things, and they have to be brought into the fullness of it based on the life expectancy.
Yep. So, and actually it's roof, load-bearing walls, flooring and foundations, fireproofing and fire suppression, plumbing and electrical, windows and exterior doors, and any other structural elements affecting safety. So what has to happen is, for every one of those condos, they have to have a separate reserve account set up for each of those component pieces, and it has to indicate what the remaining useful life is of that particular component piece, and how much the replacement cost is going to be when it's time to replace it. Right. And what they do is they really look at what is the balance that they have allocated versus the remaining useful life versus the replacement cost, and you can pretty easily come up with an estimate of where you're going to have problems, and where, you can even kind of look and see approximately, based on the anticipated cost, how much those assessments are going to look like. So
I just thought of this, but I think this it's setting everything back, because there's so many people, so many condo associations that were completely unprepared for this, right? And so we're seeing, and this is what's part of the that's going on in the condos, and it's, I think, going to get worse before it gets better. But we're seeing drastic assessments and drastic increases in HOA fees. But in the long run, I actually think this is going to reduce assessments. Once everybody's, up to speed with all their reserves and all their things, then you're not going to have surprise assessments where the elevator went out.
Well, that's the whole intent of the
thing.
legislation.
That's going to be a really good thing for condo owners. You're not going to have to worry about these big giant assessments when the roof needs to be replaced and you didn't have enough reserves. So in the long run, like 10 years down the road, it's going to be a good thing. But right now, there's a whole big brouhaha about it. Like it's just
there are still some great complexes out there.
Oh yeah, and newer ones that. Yeah.
And newer complexes that have really set themselves up for success, and they have the proper reserves set aside, and they've been very fiscally responsible with managing the HOA reserves and everything. And there's a lot of them that are great buys, and they're going to be great. And
of course there's the other factor is insurance, which isn't part of this, but that also can increase HOA fees. But that's just one of those things in Florida that, the insurance in Florida is it's trying to get corrected with having more competition
with condos.
come in,
with condos, as you know, you've got a master insurance policy, and that's typically the largest single component part of it, of where the HOA fees go in any specific complex.
But those have also seen a big increase.
Of course.
At the same time this is all going on. So it's like this perfect storm